Hey everyone, welcome to our last installment of the seventh cycle of the American Mussar Weekly Gathering. This will be our second week exploring the soul trait of Yirah, which means simultaneously fear and awe. And last week we kind of focused on the awe side, and this week we'll focus more on the fear side. So first, as we always do, we will begin with a short meditation. So I invite you to relax in your seat and close your eyes and take in a deep breath through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And again, inhale through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And as you go at your own pace of inhaling through the nose and holding, and exhaling through the mouth and holding. If thoughts should come into your head, just observe them and let them pass, like watching a car move past on the road. Now is not the time for solving problems. Right now, all you need to do is inhale through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And on your next inhale, say to yourself, Shema, and on the exhale, listen. Shema, listen. In Shema, we're listening deeply, without judgment, without offering advice. In Shema, we are listening with an open heart. Shema, listen. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. Hey, Stephanie and Karen and Marianne, welcome. And Toby, I don't know if I said hi to you when you arrived, but hello to you as well. Okay, so as I said before, today we'll wrap up this cycle. Next week, we will kind of get together for a little post-ordination party. And if you want to bring a little poem or your favorite psalm or something that you like or relates to transformation or what have you, and so we'll have a little gathering. I would serve cake, but that'd be kind of pointless, over Zoom. Rude to just sit and eat it. All right, so let's delve in here. So for our first kind of our opening discussion from Proverbs, someone like to unmute and read this?
Sure, I can read it.
Thank you, Siri.
The prudent person sees trouble ahead and hides, but the naive continue on and suffer the consequences. From Proverbs 22:3.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to stop the share. I will pop that in the chat. So you can see it and percolate on it. So what is Proverbs? What does this bring up for you? What is the point they're trying to teach? Yeah, Wendy.
Well, I see a lot in the white space in that particular proverb. I'm thinking it's actually giving us a template for prayer, because you need to pray for insight, for wisdom, for knowledge, for actually seeing things. And then it says run and hide. And in Psalms, the divine is always saying that God is a rock. I am your rock. So I think of a huge boulder, probably because I'm living in Arizona, and I just go run and hide behind the boulder.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. Some great connections there. Who else? What is this? What is this? What connections do you make? What about this piece with the consequences? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Does that seem kind of harsh? Is it puzzling? Yeah, Sue.
Yeah, well, the naive, I'm just, the person that doesn't know, I guess, is the naive, right? And they keep going without knowledge. And then there's a consequence
Mm,
for their actions. It seems to me that, I think about Proverbs, it's all about wisdom.
mhm,
So this is from Proverbs, and it's saying,
yeah,
if you're not wise, if you don't get to that place where you
mm,
are wise, there's a consequence to that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Ron. Oh, I think Ron
And
was frozen.
hiding for trouble. I
So
don't
Ron,
know that
you
that's
were frozen there for just a minute, so you're back.
okay. Better now?
Yes.
I don't know about hiding from trouble. I'm not sure that that's the Jewish way. We're told if there's you got to lean into things. So if I'm hiding for something, how am I going to be able to lean into it? I understand recognizing the trouble, but what I don't know is that hiding from it is a good answer.
Hmm. Yeah, maybe hiding isn't the good answer. Certainly not always the right answer, and sometimes there's nowhere to hide. But I almost would like it better if it said the prudent person sees trouble ahead and plans accordingly. And maybe then it's like, okay, well, I gotta get out of town. There's a hurricane coming in, gotta go. As opposed to, well, some political situation at work, you know. God, I mean, that's what this makes me think of my time in corporate when I just blithely went along with whatever was happening. And there were times where, later in my career, I had some corporate savvy and I'd be like, oh, I'm not going to do that because someone's trying to set me up for failure. But yeah, it's like, and so there's something really important about just understanding that there are consequences, which might seem really obvious, but it isn't always obvious when we're kind of in the moment or anticipating what they might be. Yeah, Sue.
I just wanted to comment because you mentioned the hurricane. So my parents who live in Florida are, there's like a 6-month period where there's hurricanes.
Hmm.
And so I think that's a great example because you do when there's a hurricane, you have to hide. You have to go into this special place.
Mhm.
And, just so what this says is that's trouble ahead and you actually hide. And then if you don't, you would suffer the consequences. So that's a very concrete example that helps me to understand the sentence.
Yeah, and we all saw what happened to Dorothy when she didn't hide from the hurricane. I mean, she got, hit with a house and transported to a whole other magical land. So, you may not be up for that kind of experience. Ron.
I live in Florida, and there are consequences whether you stay or whether you go. Because
Mm,
I've had friends who have fled the hurricane, and what happened was the hurricane really didn't land where we were, it landed where they were going.
mm,
So sometimes you just don't know, but you do have to make a decision. But understand that even one way or the other, there's always consequences. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad.
yeah,
Nothing is consequence free.
well said. Hey, Joanne, welcome. Hi,
Hi.
Nancy. Hi, Harry. So we're talking about, I'll put it in the chat again, this saying from Psalms, the prudent person sees trouble ahead and hides, but the naive continues and suffers the consequences. And we were talking about hiding and about consequences, and maybe it's more about planning than about hiding, but that's kind of where we are. Anyone else have any
Okay.
thoughts or reactions they want to share? Sarah?
I think this is kind of cynical. I mean, when I read it, I didn't quite understand it. But then as I hear people reflecting, I'm understanding a little bit more. I have been the kind of person that if I call it like I see it, but then if you put it out there, your head is on the chopping block.
Mm,
And so I can see how you suffer the consequences. But I mean, the prudent person sees trouble ahead and hides. That doesn't, to me, that's not very brave.
mm.
Right.
I mean, and the naive continue on and suffer the consequences. It's very negative. It's very fear-based, this whole thing. It's fear-based.
Yes, well, that is our yeah, that's our theme of the week. But yeah, I think it's also a little judgmental um and there's also a case to be made. So it's an interesting discussion. But I have Karen and then Harry.
I don't think that hiding when you see trouble is the same as not dealing with it. If I really came across what seemed to be something very troubling, I might want to give myself distance um, to protect from the immediate threat, immediate problem, the immediate conflict. But avoiding conflict doesn't necessarily mean avoiding it for the long haul.
Hmm.
It just means getting out of the way. And then maybe this can be addressed at another time. But for people who are very naive, they could walk right into a spider's web and not realize that there's a web right in front of them. They're just not aware.
Yeah.
And so for them, it becomes more problematic when you are more naive. Anyway, that's my take. I don't know that I would walk right into trouble, but it doesn't mean that if it was an issue I thought needed to be addressed, that I might not try to do it at a less troubling time.
I think awareness is a really good word. It reminds me of like when my daughters first started going out on their own or traveling, whatever. I would say situational awareness, don't be buried in your phone. Keep an eye on what's going on around you. You see an angry mob, go the other way, whatever. Or I also gave them that we would watch a lot of Marvel superhero movies, and I would say, there are two super beings having a fight. Don't sit there and watch and have a building get knocked on you. Just get out of the way. Okay, we have Harry and then Joanne and then Dana.
Yeah, I guess I'm having trouble with the word naive. And they're
Hmm.
not naive. It can just be, they look at the situation, they weigh it, they think about it, they look at their past experience, and they make a choice. And sometimes it's the wrong one. Many times it's just be safe and not sorry. It's sometimes the best way to go. But for whatever reason, they decided to stay. They didn't think it's going to happen to them, but I don't think the word is naive. They just made a wrong choice. But they could be very bright and they could do what they're doing, and maybe they've made choices like this before and it's turned out very well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Just because someone continues, it doesn't mean they're naive. They might be choosing to continue. And I would imagine sometimes, kind of to Karen's point, some people aren't even aware there was an issue to begin with. Kind of
That's a problem.
walking down the street, and that's where you get in trouble. That's where you start learning lessons the hard way.
Yep. I'll tell you, there's a lot of scams going on with the elderly, and that's a great example. of them being naive and trusting
Yeah,
and making the wrong choice
yeah,
versus being prudent or talking to other people that's saying, does this make sense? So yeah, a lot of times that's where they are naive.
thanks, Harry. Joanne?
Yes, I thought of the example of like tornadoes are coming or terrible thunderstorms are coming. And, you know, well, I love The Wizard of Oz. So, you know, like the family all goes down into the storm cellar, you know. There's a twister, you know, that's prudent.
Mm-hmm.
And Dorothy doesn't. She, you know, she's not aware and she, you know, runs away from home, you know. And then she decides she better go back and doesn't quite make it in time. So that's what I think of. You know, there's certain things, yeah. I mean, you know, and I think of also very sadly the people who went into their safe room on October 7th, but it turned out not to be very safe for a lot of them.
Thank you,
And,
Joanne.
but okay, yeah.
Okay, was there something else? No, okay, great. Dana?
When I heard this quote, I thought about like riding, like being in the ocean, and someone who's never been in the ocean, like who has never swam in the ocean before, might not know which waves to duck and which ones to ride. And so, but I think in general, like when people talk about like the prudent person and then the naive person, to me, it's more of like the experienced and the inexperienced because you only be, I think, like from experience comes wisdom. And so if you've never experienced anything and you've never made mistakes, then you have nothing to impart onto others. And I think, yeah, in general, a person doesn't become prudent without making mistakes. So
Yeah. Thank you. Well said. We all make mistakes, and you know, some lessons we're going to learn the hard way. You know, we're going to make mistakes, we're going to learn from it, and wisdom arrives. So thank you. All right, well, let's go a little bit deeper. Let's see, we're going to close the chat. We'll open this up. So we had talked last week that Yirah can be either fear or awe. And we're going to kind of talk about this idea of, you know, fear of the divine, fear of heaven, you know, as the beginning of wisdom. Dana just said, you know, well, maybe the wisdom comes from experience. This is a little bit of a different perspective. You know, it's also, but let's take a look at the spectrum. We had a different spectrum last week for awe. For fear, the way that I envision this, it's really about a fear of consequences. It's not like, oh, it's a dark night and there's a wild dog that's, you know, coming towards me. That's sort of a different kind of fear. This is sort of the fear we might feel being in the presence of something overwhelming. And I think of it as fear of consequences. So it's not about being afraid to take action. It's about being afraid of really about understanding what the consequences are. So if we have too little kind of fear of consequences, we can get very reckless and rash. But if we get too fearful of consequences, we can become risk averse and paralyzed. And that's a difficult place to be as well. Any comments about the spectrum?
I have a question.
Yes.
What we're talking about here, I believe, is the relationship we have with God. And what I'm wondering about is when I'm fearful of my consequences, and if I have too little, it strikes me as strange about the relationship I'm going to have with the supreme being, or whatever it is that is everything in the universe. I'm just having a little difficulty with the idea of, I understand fear of consequences, and that's a great way to interpret it. Otherwise, you're actually afraid. You're still afraid of the consequences of your consequences, or the consequences that are going to be rained on you from above. Because in Torah, that's the kind of consequences those people get.
Yeah.
So I'm just a little bit baffled at the moment. Specifically, I love the idea of fear of consequences one way or the other. But what I'm wondering is, are the consequences brought on by me, or are the consequences brought on by the universe upon me? I'm done.
Sometimes the question is better than the answer possibly could be. Part of what I was doing when I gave this formulation is when I was writing the book and I was putting together the ideas for American Mussars, I wanted to give an approach for people who maybe didn't really believe in a supreme being that gave out rewards and consequences. And so what's a lesson that we could kind of impart to hold on other in a wider range of situations? And even within the Torah, there's a lot of reward and punishment, but in other books of the Bible, it sort of refutes the rewards and punishment, like the book of Ecclesiastes, like the book of Job. It's not, part of like those very late writings were saying, hey, this doesn't match our life experience. There's like really righteous people where awful things happen to them, and there's really horrible people that have all kinds of money and power and seem to have a good life, and there doesn't seem to be any lightning bolt, which is giving them consequences. Um, that's a whole thing that we could spend weeks talking about. But it's a good point, Ron, for sure. Okay, so I think where I want to go next, actually, Dana brought up the ocean. And last week we looked at an excerpt from my friend Chell's thesis. They wrote about surfing a palace in time, the phenomenological experience of God. And they're a surfer. They interviewed a bunch of Jewish surfers. So could someone please unmute and read this first bullet?
Sailors see God through intense Yirah. How do you say that? Yirah?
Yirah, yes.
Yirah, fear, and awe. This suggests the person who journeys on the water has direct access to God. Being on the sea opens one up to the possibility of a chaotic, dangerous, and wondrous experience. One must be prepared to endure it, and in that enduring, one will offer that thanksgiving for being so close to the edge of life and death. It reflects back to when
Okay, let's just
Moshe,
pause there. Actually, why don't you finish it? Why don't you keep going?
is it pronounced Moshe?
Moshe.
Moshe. Sorry, I'm a convert.
No,
It reflects
nothing to apologize for.
convert to Judaism. It reflects back to Moshe, to when Moshe received the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai, and the elements of lightning, thunder, and stormy weather are present and followed by God's commandments to Moshe. With this, we can see how often God comes to us through the natural elements in Torah. I'm not going to try to say that name. Surfing a palace in time, the phenomenological experience of God.
Okay, well done. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to stop the share once again. And their name is Chell Mandel. One of my classmates, also Arab Rav, also will be ordained on Monday. So what are some of the ideas that resonate with you or don't resonate with you, what Chell was writing about? It's funny when Dana brought up the ocean, I was like, okay, well, I'm ready for this one. We're gonna go on the water in a little while. Sue.
The part about receiving the Ten Commandments makes me think of when I chant Torah, and I have the same like whenever I do it, and I've talked to other people and they have a similar experience of when you hold the yod and it shakes. And even though if I know it, if I had studied it a lot and I'm prepared, when I get up there and I take that yod, I have this fear and my hand is shaking. And it's such a moment of that fear, but also awe to be up there chanting. I always feel that. And that reminded me, that second passage reminded me of that when you're up at the mountaintop at Mount Sinai, that the trembling, but then also the awe.
And for those who may not know, the yod is like the little pointer that you hold when you're chanting Torah, and you kind of follow along with each word, which helps you keep your place. So thank you, Sue. Other comments, thoughts? Yeah, Joanne.
Yeah, this also made me think of the story of Yonah when he's in the ship with the other sailors, and the seas are going crazy and they can't get back to land. And they draw lots and they find out that he's the problem and they throw him overboard because he says that's what you need to do. And then
I think that's what they were writing this in response to. Like they had a clip from Jonah, and then we're kind of writing this commentary on it. So your instincts are
yeah, that's what it reminds me of. And even, the experience of God, I forget who that was. I don't think that was Moshe, but the still small voice after, the lightning and the thunder and whatever, all this
that was
natural
Elijah.
events. Yeah. But it's a way to experience God
Thank you.
after all that stuff going on.
And it's kind of on the edge, there's, you don't kind of know which way it's going to go.
Right.
I have an experience of God and I might end up in the drink, and that might be my last experience. So it's a really interesting metaphor. Ron.
There's a spot in Northern California. You've probably heard of it, Greg. It's called Half Moon Bay. And what makes this spot so special is it's a spot where the biggest waves in California come to, and where surfers go to surf them. Now, I've been there before, and I didn't surf the waves. That's crazy. I'm crazy fear of going out in that water. However, the waves are awe-inspiring. When you see a 30-foot wave, it takes your breath away. And I know some of the surfers who go out there and surf it, and I assure you that fear isn't what they experience. All they're experiencing is the awe. I think what we're talking about here might be something that has to do with experience, but ultimately the consensus is the waves are awesome.
Yeah, that was our reading from last week, I think, also from Chell, where it talked about that was the one universal thing from the surfers was how awe-inspiring it was. Here they were talking about, the story of Jonah and wondering, well, maybe, this whole thing of being on the sea is there's in our text, it's talking about connecting with the divine as well, even though there is someone once had a shirt which was really cool of like Moses surfing. I can't remember everything on it, but it was it said hang 10, and there's Moses on a surfboard holding the 10 commandments, so it's a good shirt. Marianne.
Well, first of all, I have to say, I think Mel Brooks said that Moses had 15 commandments, but dropped one tablet. So, but anyway, I don't like this whole idea of the fear of God. My whole life has been spent trying not to have fear of God, because I can't have a relationship, whatever that is, with something I'm afraid of. And so I think, Greg, so you know this. So the word that's translated as fear is also translated as awe. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Are there any other translations or just those two?
I mean, really, it's kind of both simultaneously, sort of
Oh,
like what Sue was talking about, where it's like I'm up there to chant Torah, and it's just like this overwhelming experience. Like the experience in Mount Sinai was completely overwhelming, where people were seeing sounds and hearing colors, and it was almost like just an overwhelming, all of the senses became confused. So,
okay. Thank you.
sure. Harry, if you could remember to unmute.
I think what this is sort of saying to me is the thought of feeling alive. I want to feel alive.
Mm,
How do you feel alive? It turns out you have to be near death.
mm,
And people that take extraordinary risks, they feel alive because they're at the edge and they can go either way, but they feel this connection. It's very emotional.
mm,
It makes a lot of sense. And that's why people do it, because, whether it's skydiving, it's a great example of being near death, and anything that's dangerous and surviving is really feeling alive. The only trouble is it could be addictive. And anything addictive that you do too much, you know what happens. It's the law of averages. But I really feel that this is what this is saying to me, is
mm,
feeling alive and being close to death and awe.
mm.
Does that make
Thank you,
sense?
Harry. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's how some people kind of find meaning, and for them, that's kind of where that intensity, that knife edge, kind of brings it all together, and
And
that's
that's
not
what
like
is, and that's what surfing 30-foot waves will do to you.
hmm.
That's that
I suspect that people still can feel the awe of the sea without the 30-foot wave, but it's still dangerous.
yeah.
You still got to respect the sea,
But
my
you're
hope is never turn your back on the ocean, because it's
but if you're riding it, it's a totally different experience.
yeah, yeah.
But anyway,
We
that's my
also talked about in equanimity, the mantra, it's better to ride the wave, better to surf the wave than to get swept out to sea or pounded into the sand. So it's a powerful metaphor. Ron, I saw your hand go up and down. Did you have something you wanted to add?
No, it was a minute ago you talked about at Sinai where you said that the people's senses got confused and they were hearing colors and seeing sound. My point being that maybe they were given a gift at Sinai, and that's really how the senses are supposed to work. You
Mm,
don't know.
maybe, maybe. Okay, so let's take it a little bit further, and then we will go into our breakout rooms. I don't want to do this one. Let's do this one from Rav Cook. Might do a little switch for what we're going to talk about. And I have a volunteer to read this
I mean, it is forbidden for religious behavior to compromise a personal, natural, moral sensibility. If it does, our fear of heaven is no longer pure. Rabbi Abraham Isaac Cook, Orot HaKodesh for you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll kind of see where this one takes us. I'm going to put it in the chat. You can percolate on this idea. One's fear of heaven not being pure.
Mm.
Obviously, he thinks fear of heaven is a good thing.
Mhm.
But what is he getting at here?
Mhm.
Does anyone remember the story of the zealots from the Book of Kings? From the where we got the word, it was when the Romans were besieging Jerusalem, and the zealots were not going to surrender, we're not going to compromise. No one is allowed to leave the city. We have no problems killing any Jews who try to leave the city and talk to the Romans. I mean, they were religious fanatics, which is where the word zealot comes from. So, and so what would Rav Kook maybe say to them? It's like, well, our religion says we got to kill all these people to keep them from, betraying us. Or so what might, is that okay? Does anything go in the name of religion?
And everything.
Yeah, Joanne.
You know, a lot of religious fanatics just think that, they don't have like this sensibility, maybe we're not in balance. And they somehow think that they have like a zealot, has the right to, I don't know, do something to other people who don't share their views or don't share their religion or, and so that belies the fear of heaven because there's things you're not supposed to be doing, like killing people, because they believe differently than you or they want to do something different than you want them to do. And so, yes, they don't really have that yirah and awe, even if they say, that they're doing this in the name of God. It really is a desecration, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Joanne. There is the way the rabbis kind of got around this reward and punishment issue that I talked about earlier of, well, bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people. And so they talked about there's the world to come, and your punishment's going to come later in the world to come, or your reward's going to come in the world to come. And part of that gets wrapped up in this idea of fear of heaven. It's sort of like if your consequences aren't in this world, but they're later. So it's almost like a little bit of a checks and balances. It's like, hey, uh, just think about the big picture, not about maybe this narrow issue. Ron.
The kind of fear that gets instilled by the zealot is a corruption of the idea of fear of God.
Hmm.
Both of them use the word fear, but the fear that the zealot produces, once again, is a corruption of this idea of the fear of God, even of your watered down version of fear of consequences.
So, and how that, I love that, Ron. Thank you. And if I can ask you, how does Rob Cook teach us we should tell the difference? Like, how
If
can
you
we
go
tell
back,
whether it's a corruption or not?
I think that's what it ultimately, when I read what you put up from Rob Cook, that's what I took away from it. Because the way he words those two pieces together, it turns out that the type of fear that he's talking about is not a good kind of fear. It's a corruption of the idea of fear of God or fear of heaven. And I
Right.
think it's all contained within that brief 2-sentence thing that you put up a minute ago.
Yeah, yeah. No, I was asking, and maybe Wendy, if this is what you wanted to comment on, what are some of the words in there that he says we can tell that something is a corruption?
Yes, it's good. When it compromises a personal, natural, or moral sensibility,
Right.
that's when it's,
Yeah. It's like, what, oh, you got a fear of God, you have to do this. It's like, well, you know, that goes against all kinds of sensibilities and other teachings in the Torah and other kind of my natural sense of right and wrong.
yeah, I think you have to look at the outcomes and see what those are going to be, and if it's going to hurt anybody or hurt yourself or go against
Yeah.
the 10 utterances or anything that you know from the divine to be ethical and moral for yourself. You
Mhm.
don't go against that and say, hey, this is religious behavior, and so I can go against this. It's a
Right.
compromise. There's no such thing. You're not really compromising. You're just not, it's just not fear of heaven. It's no longer pure.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like a little way of reality checking.
Mm.
Joanne.
Yeah, it also brought to mind to me, when these like ultra Orthodox men would like spit at young women or girls who weren't dressed the way they thought they should be dressed, even though they were dressed in a modest manner. I mean, that's so awful, to do something like that.
Yeah,
And
so
of course,
that's an example that some people will interpret as like, yeah, hey, whoa, why are you spitting on a child? Because of your religious beliefs. Seem that doesn't seem right. Now they would have their own justification, and
not kosher.
but I think Rav Kook, for me, that's who he's speaking to, someone who's uses their religiosity to justify certain behaviors. Yes, Dana.
I kind of took this a little bit differently. Um, when I thought of like it's forbidden for religious behavior to compromise a personal, natural, or moral sensibility. To me, I took it more as the religion being kind of rote and without meaning.
Hmm.
And so it's like if you pray every day because or every 3 times a day every day because God told you, or because that's what people say to do. But if you find a way to conceptualize for yourself why it it would
Dana, you're freezing a little bit. There may be an internet connection. You might want to turn off your camera so we might be able to hear you better. Uh-oh. Okay, well, we will hope that her connection is restored, and when it is, we will um, let's see. Okay, so for our breakout rooms, I'm going to put this in the chat, and we won't have a ton of time today, but I do want to let us get there. So today, maybe talk about, if there may not be time to create a mantra, but talk about this idea of transforming fear into awe. And as inspiration, we have this teaching from Rabbi uh, Judith Lazarus Siegel. Hey, Dana, welcome back. Do you want to? I know it sounds like you had an internet glitch there, so please pick up where we missed probably a chunk of what you said.
Yeah. Okay. Um, basically what I wanted to say was, without finding intention, like, and going back, to me, the way that I perceive Yirah and the fear of God, because I related a lot to what you said, Marianne, about kind of having trouble with that concept of like fearing God. To me, it's like a the fear comes from the contrast of the capabilities of God and the capabilities of humanity and like what one person can do as an individual. And I guess the difference is so overwhelming. I guess it can cause some sort of, it can be scary considering that all of that can come against you, but it also can be inspiring because it can also work to your favor as well. So I guess the whole, if it says if it does, our fear of heaven is no longer pure, I guess heaven is meant to be experienced and not conceptualized.
Hmm.
And so yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I love the way you I love your take on that. And that's a little bit related to what I just put in the chat, and I'll put it in again because you may not have been here. So the idea is about transforming fear to awe. So this is from Rabbi Judith Lazarus Siegel in the Mussar Torah commentary. But the idea is Jacob had a lot of fear of both God and of his brother. He has this experience with this angel person, his conscience, who knows what. And he kind of turns it into something more productive. So in the breakout groups, just take a little bit, like you can either work on a mantra, like some saying that you would do, or maybe a strategy or a practice to kind of turn fears into something more productive. So let me get the breakout rooms going, and we won't have a ton of time today. Okay. So just click join room.
With my group mate was to transform fear of other people into awe of Hashem by finding a way to resolve, fear, either whether it has to do with apologizing for something or finding something good in that other person who I didn't behave properly towards in the past.
Great.
And I could put that in the chat, I guess.
Yeah.
But transform your fear of people into awe of Hashem.
Love it. Can go a minute into overtime if one more person wants to share or comment. Okay, well, we will end with a short meditation the way we always do. So once again, close your eyes and take in a nice leisurely inhale and a nice leisurely exhale. Let's just take a moment of gratitude for everyone who has shared this Mussar journey with us. Whether it was today, for many weeks, for many years. We're all on a journey together, finding our own path. But it is so much easier when others are walking with us. When you're ready, you may open your eyes. Again, I'm so grateful that you have joined me on this path and you have taken some time out of your day and week to spend it with other souls. And as we have grown together. So thank you. Dana, if I may put you slightly on the spot today, I'm just curious how your experience was today, how you found us, and how it went.
I liked it. I mean, I've been watching the YouTube videos, and so this is the first one that I've joined as a participant. But I found Mussar a while ago, and it really resonated with me. I loved that it connected the concept of personal development with a spiritual practice. And it's nice because I'm not really connected with my Jewish community, so it's nice to have a Jewish community here. So I've been kind of like nervous to join, so today I finally decided, okay, today's the day. But I've been
so
thinking
glad you did.
several weeks.
Yeah. Good.
You conquered your fear.
Yeah.
Welcome, Dana.
Thank
We're
you.
glad to have
Yes.
you.
Yes, it's great that you joined.
Welcome, Dana. It's
Thank
not
you.
easy to come in, but this is a great group to get. So I'm really glad to have you. Perspectives of all ages are really welcome.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So we will be meeting next week for a little celebration, which means I don't have to plan anything other than maybe picking a psalm or two. And then we'll take off for a few weeks and we'll begin again sometime over the summer, no sooner than late June, but I will keep you posted. I just need to figure out. And as I said before, this will be our 8th cycle. So in Judaism, kind of when you get to 8, you've sort of broken the weekly cycle, you've broken the wheel of time, you've turned into something new. So I'll percolate a little bit on what that means. And it's kind of cool. That'll be my first one as an ordained rabbi.
The rabbi. It's wonderful.
Mazel tov.
Mazel tov.
Congrats, Greg.
Congratulations.
It's great.
Mazel tov, really wonderful.
Look forward to celebrating with you next Thursday. So until then, my friends, have a great week and a great weekend and a great Shabbat.
Early Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat
Thank you.
shalom.
Thank you. Have a great week.
Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Bye-bye.